Okay, thanks very much, everyone. Today is another Meet the Gurus, and we have the pleasure of having Kelley O'Connell here as a wonderful start to, I guess, what feels like the summer. Kelley, how are you?
Yes, I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here with you.
Thank you. And I don't even want to talk about Meet the Gurus at all because everyone knows it's about, connecting up technology and entrepreneurship and project management and a whole bunch of things and putting people who've been there, done that, like you, in front of others and allowing people to ask questions in real time. So if you're streaming us now and you're watching us now on YouTube or Facebook or other channels, please get involved and ask questions, and we'll try to answer them as best as we can. So with that, before we get going, Kelley, just tell me a little about your background. We were speaking about this before. It's very exciting, very interesting, and very unique to where you've ended up.
Absolutely, it is. So I think I was born under a lucky star. I got a degree in the 90s, just to date myself a little bit, in English literature, which didn't do much for my job prospects, but I got lucky and I landed a job at an IT department with a software development company. And that was where my love affair with technology began. And my natural sort of bossy nature landed me into project management, and it's been a match made in heaven ever since. I have loved every minute of it.
That's great. And you ended up as one of the top online instructors in the Agile Scrum world, which is fantastic. So I always, it's like when your parents say to you, what are you going to ever do with English literature? How is political science ever going to make you anything? You're not going to be a politician and all this kind of stuff. You find out that you end up with fantastic knowledge and awareness of kind of the way things work, and it works out.
Absolutely. It works out beautifully. I think the background being sort of in humanities rather than technology taught me a lot about how to communicate, how to relate to other people, how to have discussions and see possibilities and see connections that maybe not everyone sees. And that has brought me a long way. And the 90s were a really exciting time in technology.
Yeah,
it was scary, but it was fun.
We were discussing that, and there's so many of the crazy things that people, it was like in the 60s, it was the communicator and, James T. Kirk and Bones communicating through this flip thing, which was a flip phone, which ultimately became a reality. And you and I were talking about some of the wacky ideas that people came up with was, taking a camera and drilling a hole and putting a mirror, and that's called Street View.
Right.
All of the many things. And it's evolved very rapidly. And I think one of the things you were saying is just fascinating to me is that, in dealing with people, right? Agile, dealing with people is really a fundamental difference in the way software used to be built, right? It was a top-down
Definitely
military. So take us a little bit through your experience of history and evolution.
Absolutely. So what I find fascinating is that technology and all the industries used to be managed, or the leaders were people that had done the work for years, right? So they were the best at the technology. And then what happened was in the late 90s, early 2000s, what we experienced was that was no longer appropriate for someone from above and far away who had done it years ago to tell you how to do it today. It doesn't work anymore because the technology is changing too quickly. And as you know, with knowledge work, you have to creatively answer multiple questions along the entire path to make sure that you are solving the problem in the optimal way. It has to be efficient, it has to be effective, and at the end of the day, it has to be profitable. And so the farther away you are from the question, the less likely you are to get that right answer. And so that's where we saw Agile come in and say, okay, well, let's drive those decisions down to the people doing the work, not the people in the executive suite. They don't have the experience on the ground anymore that applies.
Right.
Their experience is in how to run the business. It's not in how to execute technology.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you said that. I'd like to repeat is, moving the problem down to where, the people are. And it's been, it's kind of strange that people didn't come to this sooner. But it's not just software, obviously. It's every part of business. It's legal firms moving to Agile methodologies.
Absolutely.
And how do you see that as, we're going to get into a second to the habits and how you get there. but I just really sort of framing this out is how do you see it as evolving? Obviously, we've come from software only to other elements of businesses and element processes, and frankly, probably in people's lives being agile in the way they function. How do you see it evolving? I mean, where do you see if you were to put on a sort of magical, hat? Where do you see it going?
I see Agile moving like a pebble in water. I see the circles expanding. I love that you pointed out how we're seeing Agile now in the legal field even. We're seeing now Agile as a frame for contracts. So if you want to contract someone to do some work for you, you can contract them in an Agile way. Where there are regular touch points, there are regular review points, there's regular feedback. And whether it's somebody doing a construction project on your house, because Agile is now going construction, Agile is now in agribusiness, it's in research development, it's literally everywhere. I would like to see it progress even further and influence how governments are run, how banking is run. I'd like to see it move further out into more of those high integrity, high demand, or high pressure touch points where you're interacting on high stakes things that really affect your life. So I'd like to see Agile expand into government banking, some of these very traditional places where more direct connection to the people using the service have direct input and feedback on how things are going and the problem solving and how we get there.
Well, it's quite fascinating. I mean, I do a lot of cycling, and I was cycling this weekend in the mountain, and I met a guy, and we were just riding along, and he's in the construction-oriented, engineering-oriented construction sector, and he was really saying how they're starting to do this, but they're not really knowing how to do it well. I mean, and that is a challenge, and I was trying to even at a fairly as a young guy, and I was trying to explain to him very simply how it works, waterfall versus Agile, and immediately he got it. It's not one of those things you need to be a rocket scientist to figure out. You realize that, definition of done, getting things out to the customer, making sure the customer, then gives you feedback, and you iterate and iterate and iterate, and it's exciting, right? It's not just you don't feel like you're in like what they used to call the baton death march, which is
absolutely
right? Now you're really iterating on the fly.
Absolutely, and it's beautiful, and we're seeing. I think the most important thing about Agile, so Agile is having its 20th, the Agile Manifesto has its 20th birthday this year. And I believe that Agile is just starting to grow into its full potential. It's just starting to get there, because what we're seeing as more people try the Agile approach, what they're finding is that it's flexible. You can customize it. It's specific to your work. It's specific to your team. It's specific to you. And you can customize this approach or these methods to get the exact results you need at any given point in time. And then you can change it again to face the next problem more effectively. So I think that's the beauty of it. And we're just at the tip of that iceberg.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the 5 essential skills for Agile leaders, so we can distill into these buckets. You talk about humility, outcome focus, flexibility, system view, and acting as a coach. Humility. Who would have thought that is you listed as the first attribute. So talk about that.
To me, it's the first attribute, because everything else you need to do or be as an Agile leader is based on humility. That means that you're curious. It means you are a lifelong learner. You are willing to admit you made mistakes, and you're willing to say, hey, this is what I learned from it, and this is how I'm going to not do it again, right? If only there was a life where each one of us, right, where we got here, we're perfect, we never make mistakes. A humble leader is like, nope, and I'm willing to learn from a 360-degree perspective. The people on my team, the people beside me in my peer group, the people above me, the people all around me. Humility is the foundation for all knowledge. You have to be willing to admit that there's more to know.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and most don't, and that's actually, especially when we have had historically hierarchical organizations. I mean, many organizations are very afraid of changing that. Who do I work for? It's well, I work for Sally, but maybe you don't just work for Sally. Maybe you work for the customer, right?
Right, and maybe you work for the team that maybe you work for the team that whose reviews you do. Right. I mean, and that's the shift that we're looking for.
Yeah. So talk about outcome focus. Obviously, deliverables and results are all about agility, or agility is all about that.
Yeah. So I think outcome focus to me is broader than just, hey, here's the goalpost. Outcome focus is about what we're doing, why we're doing it, what's the logic, what do we think the benefits are going to be? Is it going to save time? Is it going to drive profit? Is it going to increase customer engagement? So, and it's not just a once and done. It's not, okay, it's January 15th, we need to set our goal for the year, or the goal for the quarter, or whatever that may be. It is an ongoing dialogue throughout the timeline that says, hey, this is where we started, this is what we thought we were going to accomplish. Now we have new information that has tweaked that a little bit. So while that's still our outcome, these are the results that we think we're going to see. So outcome focus requires you to keep your eye on the prize, so to speak, but also take in information, share it with your team as new information comes, and you're refining your understanding of the results you're going to get from that outcome. And it's a collective journey. It has to be collective so that we can co-own the outcome we're focused on. It doesn't do any good if it comes from on high and you're told this is what you're going to do for the next 6, 9, 12 months. It's more important to have a dialogue about it. Again, ideas come from every direction. Take them in, make adjustments. Outcomes need to be a flexible conversation over time.
Yeah, it feeds nicely into the next idea of flexibility, right? If your outcome is focused and the outcomes define or require another change, you've got to change.
Absolutely. And that's one thing that I've seen in my years in IT and business is that once an organization starts down the path of a particular outcome, no matter what information comes back to them that tells them maybe that's not the right outcome to focus on, there's a tendency not to say no or to stop the effort. Flexibility is not just about let's be flexible in how we're solving the problem or how we're attaining the outcome. It's also flexibility to say, hey, now we have new information. It no longer makes sense for us to invest in this. And that's okay. It's not a failure. It's a gift, right? It's a lesson. Now we know that we have to keep our eyes and ears open as this feedback comes back to us and be flexible enough to say, I'm gonna put a pin in that because it's not gonna benefit us the way we thought. We're just gonna stop that, and now let's brainstorm and we'll focus on our next priority outcome.
And also then it feeds into the system view. Now, system view, I assume you're not referring to the hardware, software, and what plugs into what and what API is RESTful.
That's right.
And so talk about system view.
So to me, system view is understanding that every organization is an ecosystem, and each department within, so it's a nesting layer of ecosystems, right? Your team is an ecosystem. The organization or the department that team fits into is an ecosystem. The organization or the division then becomes another ecosystem. And then the industry you're in is another ecosystem. Taking a systems view is starting at the team level and saying, okay, how is this team connected to all the other teams within the same ecosystem? Are there patterns across this micro system that are not beneficial, that are causing problems? What are these patterns? Can we identify them? Let's find a root cause. Let's solve. Because once we start solving for the whole system, then the entire organization, the entire ecosystem improves exponentially. As you solve for one, you're solving for many, right? So it's got its foundation very much in biological sciences, believe it or not, where the concept of ecosystem came out in I think the 1940s. It was first coined. So it's very much like that. So it's, as leaders, you're no longer at the task level. You shouldn't be doing those. You shouldn't be directing that. You should be looking at the system and solving the system problems so that the whole ecosystem then functions more effectively, more efficiently, and ultimately it'll be more profitable, more rewarding.
Yeah, it's a lot of organizations that call these things in the old world things like, are you an individual contributor or not? And a lot of people, myself as included, have who try to be leaders often jump into the I've got to get it done, so I'm going to go do it. And yes, it might get it done, but it didn't get it done for the long term. It's kind of like putting your finger in the hole in a dike, and yeah, I got that one, I got this one, I got this one, all my fingers are in the dike, and then my toes, and before you know it, I got to go help, and then you've got a problem because you solve problems that people are expecting to be functioning that way, but you're the one who's supporting the solution.
Absolutely. You need to be humble enough to let your team lead you, and be standing back far enough that you can see where they're going to run into trouble, where they're going to run into problems as they're doing their work within the ecosystem. You have to be looking at the big picture and recognizing where things can go a little pear-shaped or go off the rails, and figure out, how do I prevent that for this team? I need to serve them by making sure they don't run into these things.
Well, it's interesting. And this acting as a coach is so essential. But everyone, there's lots of questions coming in. We've got over 100 people now, I think, looking at watching this stream, which is fantastic. And everyone's asking, like, what tools? Is Agile being more invested in than technology innovations? I mean, isn't technology going to replace Agile, and isn't going to become all automated? But ultimately, Agile comes down to people, right? And this is what this whole Meet the Gurus is about. This discussion is about, you got to really think about this as a people problem, right?
It is a people problem. It is not a process problem. This is not something that can be automated. You cannot automate projects, right? That will write the code, test it out. You can't automate that. People are still needed. This isn't a process or a machine that robotics can solve, or that's not what we're dealing with. As long as we have companies and jobs and teams and people, Agile is a solution, and you can't code your way out of Agile. Because, to your point, it is a people problem. It's a people opportunity. It's how do we improve the effectiveness of people when they're working together. So there has been conflict and issues across humanity for millennia, right? We're not exactly a peaceful species. Right. And so what Agile seeks to do is to harness some of our natural human traits and abilities, our need to belong, our need to feel like we're contributing to a purpose greater than ourselves, a need to feel really good at what we do. And Agile tries to take all of those innate human characteristics and harness them for the benefit of the ecosystems in which we work, so that everyone can benefit as individuals, as teams, as systems.
Yeah, and I think that I'm going to just reemphasize that people. There are lots of questions coming in. I'm going to read some of them. I've been paraphrasing a few of them into a question, kind of into our discussion anyway, but I'm going to read a few of them. And it's really just, the emphasis is people. Folks, the emphasis is people. So here's a question. Can you talk about how Agile is used in various ways on the business side outside of software? I think we've been talking about that, but maybe
absolutely
delve in a little more.
Absolutely. I have actually personally seen Agile applied in marketing. I've seen it applied in sales. Specifically, the Agile techniques that work really well in marketing and sales. When there's not a big project, but day-to-day work, I see a lot of Kanban applied in those situations. And then they'll apply a Scrum type framework or an XP type framework in order to accelerate delivery of bigger project type efforts rather than day-to-day business. I've also seen Kanban applied very successfully in health clinics. I've seen it in hospice situations where they're using Kanban systems to make sure that all the patients and all the caregivers are paired up and matched. and that all the tools that they need to help those individuals are in place. So I've seen in legal departments, there are daily tasks that they need to do that they can run via Kanban. Yep. There are larger contracts they need to manage using something a little bigger and more robust like Scrum.
Do you, in your experience, when you're running, sorry, there was a little echo there. So in your experience, when you have a recurring task, so every week you have to do this, or yes. And it's more of a process, do you put that on a Kanban board? Or does it just become, for a while I've seen organizations where they put it in a recurring task and it never gets done because it says recurring, right. And no one ever right. looks at the recurring one. So do you just, do you just keep posting it, or do you change the way it's articulated and the so-called definition of done? Obviously, the right. task should have a definition of done, right? I mean, is that an important Absolutely. Part of the task definition?
Everything should have a definition of done. And I use Kanban for a lot of my personal repeatable tasks. And then right now I'm working on a book, so I put myself in a Scrum framework to do the book. But my daily tasks are still on a Kanban board on the whiteboard in my office, even here at home, because it helps me stay focused on these are the things that I need to do. Some of them recur weekly, some of them recur every few weeks, some of them are actually quarterly. And that's okay. They just cycle through, right? And they just get prioritized based on how frequently I need to recur them. So I run both at any given point in time because I would love to be able to say I'm dedicated to one project and one project only, but I'm not. And most people aren't, and that's okay. You just need to apply the right Agile principle to whichever project you're on. Is it short-term and fast delivery? Is it long-term and more deep thought?
Just lost you there. Looks like you froze. Uh-oh.
Big development or big work.
Somehow you just froze. So if you can repeat that for everyone, you were in a, gestural position yeah. as if you were being painted by Leonardo, and they were. So you got to hold this for the next 60 seconds. No, if you can repeat what you were saying, that would be great because it just froze. The internet is being stressed, I guess.
It is being stressed today. So what I'm saying is that I don't work in software. I don't do software development. Everything I do is not software development. Mm-hmm. And I'm using Agile to write a book. I'm using Agile to manage my customer engagements, my customer contracts. So, I'm managing my daily work using Kanban. I'm managing my higher energy work, my different client projects using Scrum. So if I can do it, I think kind of anybody can. You don't have to be an expert. All you have to do is be willing to try.
Yeah, we're going to get to the question of about management skills because I think you've articulated them in these 5 essential skills. Leadership skills are management skills, by the way, just for everyone.
Absolutely.
I'm sure everyone's aware of that. But there are questions coming in on this, and of course, everyone's going to ask, which tools do you prefer? I mean, there are many out there. We have to use Zoho, Sprints, but which tools and why do you, and not so much as, which brands, but what do you, maybe mention a few of the brands or maybe things that you've used and be happy with, but what do you like about them ultimately? What that makes it different, and it's what I call the aha moment. What is really exciting or unique about those tools?
So one of my favorite tools right now is Miro, Miro. Miro is fantastic because they have templates for Kanban boards, Scrum task boards. They also have whiteboard functionality, so you can have one big page that has your Scrum board or your Kanban board, and it's a whiteboard at the same time. So it makes it easy to collaborate. Everybody can jump in on the same board. You can have a conversation within the board. You can join it together. You can work independently. You can work together. So Miro is one of my favorites right now.
Okay, and is it that, where do you see those things going? Where do you, again, you've used so many of them for a long time. What is the big, the gap? I know actually, for example, I went to an event here and one of the very senior people at Microsoft who's, actually one of the people who was on, he had enough money to go onto one of the space shots. So that kind of person.
Oh, nice.
And he was working on some whiteboarding technology at Microsoft now. So and those are obviously integral to the digital world that we're now living in all the time.
Absolutely.
What do you see as sort of the next things that you need as an Agile leader?
What I would love to see is a combination that takes the functionality of a Miro, where I've got my whiteboard, I've got my task board all in one place, and I want that merged with some sort of video conference tool. So I wouldn't have to have a separate Zoom call. I could go into something like a Miro and connect to people real time or asynchronously. The line is always open. You jump in, you jump out, right? You work together and then you step away to get some of that quiet time you need to think and process, right? So that's what I'd love to see.
Would it be useful to have some embedded? I mean, we're in the training business, but I'm thinking about it really from like just-in-time training tools, where you're in the middle of something.
For sure.
Everyone's moving just in time. I mean, who wants to watch an 8-hour course anymore? But there are modules within that. We all know that education is often sliced these days into 3 to 8 or 3 to 10 minute segments. What kind of things would you like to see embedded, which would be just in time? I mean, you mentioned the video part of that, but what other?
Right. I'd love to be able to have a real-time training sort of channel where every, Wednesday at noon Eastern time or 6 p.m. Eastern or whatever it is, I jump into a room and anybody that has questions or is running into a situation that they just want to bounce ideas around, not just with me, but with other experts. I'd like to start crowdsourcing some of these solutions. There are lots of people out there that are solving Agile problems every day, and I would like to tap into them and bring together communities.
It's hysterical that you're saying this. I mean, hysterical. Maybe I always maybe when I find something really, really on target, I think it's hysterical. But maybe it's just enjoyable. I don't know. To me, hysterical and enjoyable seem to be the same thing. But one of the things we were just testing out some usability on our site and Usability Hub. I'm sure there's a zillion others. There are. And I wanted to figure out, where are people clicking? What's the more likely people clicking? And literally, I paid $100 in 5 minutes. I thought that they were joking. It says within 5 minutes you'll get an answer, and I picked out the cohort of people I wanted answers from. What income bracket, where they were located. Was it in Britain or in Brazil or in Bahrain? I didn't pick all the B's, but that was just a joke. But it's like instant information as to, it's kind of like merging. That's just one example of an interesting idea. Is that we're building something. Are we building the right thing? Let's test the usability. Right in the middle of the Agile process.
And I think that's where we're going as technology, as human beings, as workers. I think that's what we're trying to do. We're recognizing the shocking level of knowledge that exists all over the planet. And now we're finally able to tap into it. We're starting to apply that technology into this sort of exponential knowledge explosion for everyone. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of fascinating you say that. I've always said that it's not often what, but it's where. There's some genius sitting in Nepal right now, and may have had no education at all, but is a genius and can provide you insights into all sorts of things that you just don't know where they are. It's often it's not invention necessarily. In my experience, is always it's innovation. It's taking what's there and innovating it to apply to what you need when you need it.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more.
And you and I talked about this briefly. We're launching Guided Gurus on our platform, which is just that, which is essentially 2 panes, individual watching an instructor demonstrate something and show something, and then in the left pane spinning up if it's technology, like a Docker image of what you're working on in real time and be able to do it. So same thing, you and I talked about in potentially doing that in the Agile world, where you
I would love to
demonstrate what needs to be done and how it's done in some circumstances, and then the person can go do it. And then ultimately, just as you said, and I need help now. Can you explain now what this is? And then our system, which is in process for development, goes out and finds people who are having a similar problem, because people are having the same problem everywhere.
Absolutely.
So
all exciting changes.
Yeah, so we're trying to be agile. We're going to keep this to 30 minutes, but I think we have about 100 more questions that just came in. but it's all about, can you get me a job? I love this. This is fantastic. Yeah, I think everyone realizes that this is the way the world is moving, and everything you do in your world, in anyone's job, I should say you, meaning everyone's job, is going to be agile in some form, whether the word is agile or not, right?
Definitely, because it's a mindset. It's how are you flexible? How are you humble? How are you learning? How do you handle failure? Everyone has to be agile going forward. Everyone.
Yeah, and you're a leader in the field, so I appreciate you taking the time, and so nice to have you meet the gurus, and hopefully we'll do this again soon.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Same here, Kelley. Thanks so much.